We study the efficacy of VR learning by conducting experiments in which we directly compare how well someone can perform a task after learning in virtual reality versus after engaging in some sort of comparison learning activity like watching an instructional video or listening to a lecture.
I wanted to rethink about how I can define my own success. And then I started thinking, hey, assessment is not fair. How they can define my success? So that's why I was like, okay, I'm going to really think about how I can change this and how I can contribute to making changes to the assessment or analyzing or measuring how people really understood or learn things. Like there should be a way to quantify, like people's mind. And when people learn things, it's invisible. Like I can say, I learned this, I learned that, but how do I show you that I learned this and I know this? Just an exam that you know, right? So that's not enough to demonstrate somebody's knowledge, somebody's skills and abilities.
I wanted to become a research assistant because I am an undergraduate student interested in research in the scientific field, and I feel that virtual reality is something that has great potential, especially in the field that I'm interested in, which is the medical field. And I think that the way that it provides an opportunity for people to be involved in a simulation that's could be a real-world experience without the fear of making mistakes and facing consequences is hugely beneficial.
VR simulation allows for doing while learning. And this seems to produce a really joyful experience in people. We see that when we ask them how much they enjoy the experience, how enthusiastic they are about using that resource in the future. And this is what we call the joy of doing. One of the most surprising findings we've obtained is that when people play VR simulations, they seem to be so engaged that they lose track of time. In traditional learning, everyone's had the experience of feeling like a lecture or a training video is just creeping by and you're just waiting for it to be over. In contrast, when people play our simulations, we sometimes ask them how long it takes. And what we found is that people give estimates of playtime that are much shorter than the actual playtime. So as much as 25% shorter. So it's as though time is flying while they're having fun playing The Sims.
First, I never had VR training before. I thought that was kind of interesting and it was new. I was very excited about it, honestly. It was neat. I believe the most interesting parts that I found of the VR training were the fact that it was more hands-on than more instructional reading.
I've done a plethora of the VR simulations here with Transfr VR. I've done anywhere from electrical work to working on motor vehicles to just working in healthcare or in basic safety. I think that VR is more engaging than other learning methods because it's one thing to watch someone do something, it's another thing to be given some information about how to do something, but actually doing it and having the opportunity to just do it as many times as you want without any pressure is definitely very helpful in actually retaining the information necessary to do the task.
I feel like the VR training gives me all the information I need in order to learn a task. There's a coach there with you, there's hands-on, and the instructions are right there with you too.
The parts of the VR process that were most interesting to me were definitely how immersive it was. I had just never learned in a setting like that. And so really seeing all of those things in front of me, I would be so surprised afterwards how similar it was in real life to how it had looked in the virtual reality. The best part of training with VR is I felt like I learned the information not only so much better than I would have from another method, but I think that I was able to retain that information a lot longer than I typically do when learning tasks like that.
After a study's completed and we have the data from our participants, we analyze that data, we figure out what it's telling us about how people are learning in virtual reality, and we think about how we can use those insights to improve our product.
When we collect our data from our learners and educators, we follow the Department of Education guidelines and data privacy requirements. Also, we comply with federal law, FERPA.
The findings from these studies that I've found most surprising is that virtual reality not only helps with short-term memory retention, but really what we found most beneficial with virtual reality learning is how it affects the long-term memory of a task, and it has proved hugely beneficial in long-term memory retention compared to other forms of learning.
The reason VR is such an effective form of active learning is because it is personalized active learning for each individual person. With VR simulations, you are the star of the show, and you are the one who's doing everything, and so you really are active from start to finish, making it the ultimate active learning experience.
One of the most exciting findings we had was from a study with a community college. Well, we wanted to know if VR can actually help students with learning and employment outcomes. The study that we did with the community college, they have an automotive program, an associate degree program, and implementing VR technology actually helped their students have better course grades after the program. So that's a tangible outcome that we can use to connect that to the employability and employment outcome. We have conducted many efficacy studies already, and we have found that comparing the VR simulations with other forms of traditional learning, we already have found positive evidence.
When I was a participant, I wasn't really sure what exactly the benefits of virtual reality were, but when I was first participating in a task and I was learning it through virtual reality, I think it was just some random task, like some electrician task that I'd never thought about doing before, and I learned how to do it, and I still know how to do it to this day, even after participating in one little study and learning the task through a headset in 15 minutes. I think it's crazy how I still remember it and I can do it, and it's a task I never really would have thought about doing before. And so that's kind of something that inspired me to get into the field, because it really can make a lot of changes to people's lives.
The most important thing that instructors should know about active learning in VR is that you really can train in the headset and then translate that information to the real world with real tools and equipment. We find, in fact, in most cases that the transition from the virtual world to the real world is pretty seamless.